In that turbulent corner of the Crestwood suburb, where pristine facades hid dark secrets, a piercing scream shattered the monotony of the night. The sound echoed through the narrow streets, waking the residents and sparking a wave of shock that spread like wildfire. Surveillance lights flashed, capturing shadows dancing in a scene of panic and confusion. Thomas Mitchell, a respected lawyer now a shadow of his former self, stood paralyzed in the room, wide-eyed and fixed on the lifeless body of Sophie Reynolds. His lips trembled, but no sound escaped. Blood stained the white marble floor, painting the cold elegance of the house with red. Shards of a ceramic vase mingled with the crimson liquid, silent witnesses to a desperate struggle. Sophie's face was frozen in a silent scream, her eyes wide with a terror only she knew. Thomas could not look away, his mind spinning in circles as he tried to grasp the brutality before him. Anna Mitchell, pale as a ghost, appeared at the top of the stairs. Her eyes, empty and unfathomable, met Thomas's. For a moment, the silence between them was an abyss, charged with a silent accusation. Then, she turned suddenly and disappeared down the hallway, the door to her room slamming shut with a force that made Thomas's heart jump. The growing murmur of the neighbors invaded the room, whispers sharp as blades. Curious faces, hungry for answers, peered through the intermittent light of sirens that began to paint Crestwood in a sinister display of red and blue. The crowd gathered, eyes gleaming with a mix of fear and voracity. Marcus Hale stepped out of the car with a clenched jaw, eyes sharp as knives scanning the scene. Rachel Monroe followed closely, her muscles tense under the uniform as her mind calculated all the dark possibilities hidden in that house. Upon entering, the oppression of the atmosphere fell on them like a weight. Rachel crouched and picked up the blood-stained diary, the open pages marked with smeared words that seemed to scream for justice. Thomas watched, feeling the crushing weight of implications. Disjointed memories and fears tumbled in his mind, while Marcus surveyed every detail of the room, his eyes pausing on Sophie's vacant, terrified expression. The silence was broken only by Rachel's whisper, "We have a lot to uncover here." At that moment, Thomas knew that the nightmare had only just begun. What no one could have predicted was that, on that night, the secrets of Crestwood would begin to surface, bringing with them a terror that no one would ever forget. Sophie Reynolds was more than Anna Mitchell's best friend, she was a presence that lit up any room. At 22 years old, Sophie was known for her vibrant personality and easy laughter, a young woman who seemed to project hope in a suburb filled with pristine appearances and stifled secrets. Her friendship with Anna had begun in their early school years, and the two became inseparable, sharing confidences and dreams. The Mitchell household was the picture of a successful family. Thomas Mitchell, a prestigious lawyer, upheld an impeccable reputation, while his wife, Claire, maintained appearances with a friendly smile that never reached her eyes. Those who watched closely, however, knew that behind the elegant windows and perfect facade, the atmosphere was heavy, laden with unspoken silences and tension. In recent months, something had changed in Sophie. She was more reserved, and her smiles carried a weight that hadn't been there before. Anna noticed the distant looks her friend would cast, but Sophie always turned away when questioned. "Everything's fine," she would say, a lie masked by an empty expression. Rumors began circulating through Crestwood. Whispered comments in cafes and casual meetings about Sophie's visits to the Mitchells' home, always explained as visits with Anna. But some of these visits happened too late to be just between friends. The community, accustomed to keeping well-guarded secrets, began to stir with the discovery of Sophie's body. Who could commit such violence? And why? The tragedy at the Mitchell home cracked their reputation, exposing a world of suspicion few dared to admit. Anna, in shock, secluded herself in her room, away from voices and the oppressive presence of her father. Claire walked through the house in automatic movements, as if she could collapse at any moment. Thomas, on the other hand, couldn't shake the weight of his own thoughts, memories he preferred to forget now piling up, fragmented, threatening to resurface at any moment. However, as the days passed, the first clues began to appear, and nothing was as it seemed. The next morning brought a suffocating silence to Crestwood. The Mitchell home, now surrounded by yellow isolation tape, was a grim spectacle under the pale dawn light. Detective Marcus Hale and his partner Rachel Monroe moved through the scene with keen eyes, every detail under scrutiny. Sophie's diary, blood-marked, lay as a glaring piece of evidence, its rushed words hinting at encounters and dark fears. The atmosphere was saturated with an almost palpable tension. Forensic technicians worked in meticulous silence, capturing images of the marks on Sophie's arms. The fragments of skin under her nails were a clear sign, she fought until the end. Rachel's eyes scanned the diary's pages, noting references to a male figure that occupied Sophie's thoughts in recent days. The words were vague but infused with desperation. Anna Mitchell, pale and staring at an invisible point, was brought in for a brief interview. Her face showed nothing but utter shock, yet her hands trembled, a detail Marcus did not miss. From a distance, Thomas Mitchell maintained a stone-like expression, his gaze fixed and inscrutable. Claire, his wife, wandered the house like a ghost, her face expressionless but her eyes carrying a flicker that betrayed fear of an unspoken truth. The most alarming discovery came from Sophie's cell phone. Recent messages revealed a growing tension, culminating in a final message that seemed like a cry for help. "If something happens to me, you know who to look for." The words echoed in Rachel's mind as she exchanged a quick glance with Marcus. The possibility of a premeditated crime hovered over them like a dark cloud. The house, once a bastion of status and respect, now stood as a stage for suspicion and secrets. Every detail, from the shattered vase to the scratches on the marble floor, seemed to tell part of a story they had yet to piece together. What appeared to be an isolated homicide was turning into an intricate plot, where each clue revealed something deeper and more threatening. But what the police found next turned a simple homicide case into a much darker mystery than anyone could imagine. As the investigation progressed, the accumulating evidence began to shape a more complex and disturbing narrative. Analysis of the text messages on Sophie's phone revealed a pattern of communication exuding fear and urgency. Among the texts, one stood out, a veiled threat reinforcing the idea that Sophie knew too much and that someone wanted her silenced. Rachel Monroe, while examining Sophie's diary, noticed entries describing meetings in unusual places and a constant feeling of being watched. The enigmatic references to a male figure involved in her concerns only deepened the mystery. His name was never mentioned, but the influence he wielded over Sophie was undeniable. The forensic team found a new clue that shifted the case dynamics, a gold chain with a small heart-shaped pendant, fallen among the glass shards. Under the crime scene light, the object glinted like a silent warning. When Anna Mitchell saw the chain, she showed a subtle but noticeable reaction, a tension that coursed through her body, revealing a recognition that Rachel observed closely. The suburb of Crestwood, always vigilant in maintaining appearances, began to show cracks. Neighborly whispers intensified, turning daily routines into a network of furtive glances and whispered theories. The Mitchells' faces were now scrutinized with a curiosity bordering on accusation. Claire Mitchell, meanwhile, maintained a rigid stance as she watched the police work. Her hands clenched against her arms, fingers digging into her skin in a gesture of restraint. The control she tried to maintain was evident on her tense face and distant gaze, as if she feared that the truth about to come to light was something she had always known but never wanted to admit. Marcus Hale, reviewing the evidence, felt the weight grow with each new discovery. The chain, an apparently trivial detail, could be the key to uncovering the involvement of someone considered untouchable. The atmosphere in the Mitchell home grew increasingly oppressive, a mix of grief, fear, and secrets accumulating like a storm ready to break. The room remained steeped in cutting silence, where each new piece of evidence seemed to draw the investigators closer to a truth no one was prepared to face. And it was then that the evidence unearthed a long-buried secret, something no one was ready to confront. The final forensic analysis shook Crestwood. The fragments of skin under Sophie's nails belonged to Thomas Mitchell, confirming that she had fought for her life. The news spread quickly, turning the streets into a stage of whispers and suspicious glances. The facades of the houses, once indifferent, now seemed to conceal their own secrets. Inside the Mitchell home, Rachel Monroe and Marcus Hale felt the weight of the evidence. The golden chain with the heart pendant, now carefully stored as evidence, gleamed under the light like a silent accusation. Rachel saw a fleeting glimmer in Claire's eyes and tension in Anna's shoulders when they spotted the object. It was evident that the chain held deep meaning, an as yet unraveled link. Rachel continued flipping through Sophie's diary, each page a muffled cry of fear and despair. Suddenly, an entry in capital letters caught her attention: "He will end me if I talk." The weight of those words echoed inside her like an alarm, a revelation marking a point of no return. Marcus, standing by her side, felt the tension in every fiber of his body, a mix of anxiety and urgency. Thomas Mitchell, with his rigid posture and nervous tick in his jaw, kept his eyes fixed on an invisible spot on the wall. The tension in his shoulders revealed the inner battle he waged to maintain composure. Claire watched from afar, her gaze lost, but her clenched hands betrayed the effort to contain an emotional storm. The community, once blind to the Mitchells' apparent perfection, began questioning everything. The whispers grew louder, like a rising tide threatening to engulf the house and its secrets. Every detail now seemed part of a more intricate plot, where even the smallest movements of Anna and Claire were scrutinized. Rachel felt a tingling in her hands, the familiar anxiety of an investigation approaching its darkest point. She knew the next step, a confrontation with Thomas, would be crucial. The man who was once respected and feared was now at the center of a tragedy that tarnished more than just the family's name. The tension inside the house became palpable, as if the air itself had turned heavy. Each new detail emerged as a piece of a puzzle starting to take shape, yet its darkest parts remained hidden in the shadows. But even with all the answers that emerged, one void persisted: what truly motivated everything? And how deeply was the truth still buried? The Mitchell home had become a constant scene of tension as the echoes of discoveries reverberated throughout Crestwood. The golden chain with the heart pendant remained an enigma, its importance resonating in every uncomfortable silence and every fleeting glance from Anna and Claire. The family's immaculate facade was collapsing, revealing cracks exposing long-buried secrets. In the courtroom, the preliminary hearing was closely watched by a community divided between disbelief and the thirst for answers. The subdued murmur of the audience grew louder with each new piece of evidence presented, eyes widening in surprise or narrowing in silent judgment. Thomas Mitchell held his shoulders high and his gaze fixed, but the tremor in his hands betrayed the effort to control the storm within. Claire, seated beside him, averted her gaze to the floor, as if the truth she sought to avoid was reflected there. Rachel Monroe, sitting in the gallery, felt her pulse quicken as she mentally reviewed Sophie's notes. Each line seemed to whisper something she had yet to fully comprehend. There was a complexity in Anna's behavior that intrigued her. The young woman, present in the room, seemed a ghost of herself, her gaze drifting as if searching for an invisible escape. Tension built as the evidence was laid out. The golden chain was mentioned as a potential connection between Sophie and someone in the house, drawing looks of surprise and suspicion towards Anna and Claire. Marcus Hale, watching from the back of the room, noted how each piece of evidence cast new and denser shadows over the family, turning the trial into a spectacle of revelations and uncertainties. The impact of the Mitchells' reputation collapsing was felt in waves. The whispers of the community, once discreet, now found voice in corridors and covert gatherings. Crestwood, with its facade of perfection, began confronting the truth. Not all secrets were buried forever. Despite the evidence presented, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that a crucial detail still eluded them. Something was out of place, and Anna's silence suggested the true story had yet to be told. The trial of Thomas Mitchell advanced under the watchful eye of all Crestwood. The golden chain and Sophie's diary entries turned the case into a spectacle of dark revelations. Each new piece of evidence struck at the family's reputation, and the murmurs of the audience grew louder, a crescendo of tension that seemed to absorb the room's air. Rachel Monroe, alongside Marcus Hale, watched every reaction closely. Thomas, shoulders still held high, maintained a rigid expression, but the tremor in his hands betrayed his composure. Claire, seated nearby, kept her gaze on a fixed point on the floor as if the answers to her distress were hidden there. Anna, silent, projected an image of emptiness, but her restless hands and darting eyes betrayed an anxiety that seemed impossible to contain. The golden chain, when mentioned, provoked an almost imperceptible reaction in Anna and Claire. The glance they exchanged was quick but loaded with meaning, a glimpse of something Rachel recognized as a silent exchange of understanding. The courtroom, saturated with tension, felt like an arena where truth and deception clashed under the cold spotlight. After days of intense presentations, Thomas's conviction brought an odd sense of relief and unease to the community. Crestwood, once proud of its courteous greetings and well-kept secrets, now faced an abyss of distrust. The streets, filled with whispers, reflected a town beginning to realize that appearances were only a fragile mask. Days later, with the dust of the trial still hanging over the city, Rachel revisited the Mitchell home. The oppressive stillness seemed to hold the place's breath. Moving through the immaculate rooms, she felt an invisible weight. It was then, while inspecting a crack in the floor, that her fingers found a crumpled piece of paper. The words, written in a shaky hand, made the air around her feel colder. "There's more than you see." The truth was divided. Rachel's heart raced. The note was confirmation that, despite Thomas's conviction, there was more to uncover. Anna's silence and Claire's glances took on new meaning. The story Crestwood thought it had unraveled still held secrets known only to a few. The Mitchell home, once a symbol of prestige, now felt like a fortress of silence and shadows, where each corner held echoes of unspeakable truths. Crestwood continued to whisper, the stories multiplying like shadows beneath the flickering streetlights. But to this day, questions remain: what really happened that night? And were all the secrets truly revealed?